Baroness Jones of Moulsecoomb. Jenny, welcome to Lord Speaker's podcast. Maybe we could start by giving a reflection on your early life. Moulsecoomb is a housing estate near Brighton of social housing. So your origins and background.
Thank you, Lord Speaker. It's really nice to have an opportunity to just chat. Yes, I grew up on a council estate in Brighton, and I had a very 1950s post-war type upbringing. That the estate was built as homes for heroes, and so my dad, who'd been a cook in the RAF, was allocated a house, and it was a security thing for the whole of my my younger years. And I went to local primary, I went to the grammar school. I had a great, happy childhood. You know, we were very poor, but we never went hungry or went cold.
Yeah, but you left school and then you went back as a mature student, you know.
Yes, I left school and I went to London to do a course, but I absolutely loathed it. And I got sucked up into CND demonstrations and things like that. And then I went back to my hometown and I met my future husband, and we got married, had kids, we travelled with his work, which was as a water engineer. And so I lived in Africa and I lived in the Seychelles, both of which were fascinating, but quite difficult because I'm somebody who likes to be doing stuff and be involved. And in both those countries, they didn't really want expatriate wives to be involved in anything. And so I spent a lot of time riding horses in Lesotho and scuba diving in Seychelles.
Good. It doesn't go with your present image.
No, I know. Mind you, the horses were great. Well,
Yeah.
so was the diving. When I was diving one time, we were out on a boat, and obviously it's very hot, and everybody was getting a bit tetchy. There were about 4 of us to go in the water. And all of a sudden, a whale shark appeared. This is the biggest fish in the ocean, and although it's absolutely huge, it eats, tiny little fish. And so we all scampered down to the bottom of the ocean and just looked at this thing. And it was quite curious about us, and so it swam around us. That has got to be one of the most amazing times of my life.
Terrific, terrific. You then went into education as a mature student, something that we have in common.
Yeah.
On that. You know, I felt as a mature student that I was on the road to education and it was hard for me to get off. I had a few degrees after that.
Oh, right.
How did you feel? What did education do to you as a mature student?
Well, I got divorced, and then I was really casting around for something to do, and I thought, well, going back into education would be really good for me. And I looked for what I thought would be the easiest possible degree, and so I took archaeology, which proved not to be that easy.
I didn't think it would be the easiest.
No, it wasn't the easiest, but it was fascinating. And it meant that for the next 10 years, I travelled all over the Middle East digging different periods, different countries. That was quite an experience. But the course itself, there were quite a few of us mature students, and we did actually form a support group almost. We liaised with the younger people as well, obviously, but as mature students we had particular sort of struggles, if you like, but we supported each other.
Add a bit of colour to your experience in the Middle East after all 10 years.
Yeah, well, I was what they call a dirt archaeologist, which was I just dig, and so I dug in all sorts of eras. I mean, my preference is, post-Roman stuff just leaves me cold, I'm afraid. So I like everything before the Christian era, and but I dug in Egypt, and I handled Neolithic remains, and I dug in Syria, and that was a 13th century AD glass factory, and in Jordan, that was Neolithic, and so on. It was a complete mix. But I was a terrible archaeologist, because to be a good archaeologist, you need to read a lot and stay up to date with what's going on, because there's new discoveries virtually every day, and I wasn't very good about keeping up with those.
But it gave you a discipline.
It gave me a sense of how I like working hard, essentially. That was good to know, because even as a mother, you work really hard, but it doesn't always feel like work, whereas this was paid work that I was doing. And in Ethiopia, for example, I didn't do very well in Ethiopia because I was vegetarian when I went there, and it was in the early days of my archaeology, and it was just after a bout of war, and there were no vegetables to eat, and at lunch we had pasta with a quite thin tomato sauce, and for dinner we had boiled goat. And after 2 weeks, and I'd lost about half a stone, I started eating the boiled goat, and that quite honestly stopped me being a vegetarian, because if you can eat boiled goat, you can certainly eat other meats. So yeah, but then we were digging up some 1,000-year-old monoliths. So it's been quite varied, my archaeology.
And then you came back to the UK, and if I'm correct, you joined the Green Party in 1998.
Is that right? No, 88. 88
Sorry,
I joined,
10
yes.
years earlier. Yeah.
And
what took you into the Green Party?
well, I'd always been interested in growing food and being careful with, not trying not to consume too much, and it just fitted my ethos. And when I came back from the archaeology, I got a job in an office, in an accounts office, and thought I was settling in there, but in fact I very quickly got elected onto the London Assembly, almost by happenstance.
That was in 2000, the year 2000.
In 2000, that was almost by accident, yes. And it was a bit of a shock to my system. And after the first year on the London Assembly, the Evening Standard did a league table of the 25 Assembly members, and I came bottom. And that was a
bottom for what?
Everything really, talent, I suppose.
It wouldn't be attendance, for example.
No. It would be more about being able to speak, challenging the mayor, just positioning, I suppose. Anyway.
But politics was a new environment for you, wasn't it?
It was a new environment, and also it came with a huge sense of responsibility, because we 25 people had the opportunity to hold the Mayor of London, a quite powerful role, to account. He had to answer to us. He sat in front of us once every month and answered our questions.
Was that Ken Livingstone?
That was Ken Livingstone. Mm-hmm. I was on it for 16 years, and the first 8 years were Ken Livingstone. And he was a brilliant mayor. I know he gets bad press in all sorts of ways, but he really cared about London. He really cared about Londoners, and he did his absolute best. And he was also, because he knew where he wanted to go, for example, he wanted London to be cleaner, and he wanted better public transport and all these things, he was prepared to listen to other people's ideas, and if they fitted, then he would use the ideas, which was great for Green. And you could have a chat with Ken in the lift, and he'd say, "Oh, all right, that's a good idea." And then half an hour later, you'd have a call from his office to say, "Oh, can you come up and explain what you've told Ken he's got to do?" Mm-hmm. Whereas with Boris Johnson, who was there for the second 8-year chunk that I was there, he was completely useless, because
I think I read that you liked him.
Oh yeah, I really liked him. He made me
But you also
laugh.
liked him and didn't like him.
Well, I didn't like him as a mayor. I thought he was a rubbish mayor. Mm-hmm. And the one talent he did have was he employed people. He gathered people around him who could do the job for him. Mm-hmm. And so he had some very good people in post. And I think that's where he went unstuck as Prime Minister, because I think he had less choice about who he gathered around him. And then, of course, he made some very bad choices. But with Boris, as an Assembly member, if I met him in the lift in the basement, and I got out on the 4th floor, if somebody else got in with a better idea or a different idea, he'd have changed his mind by the 6th floor. He was utterly unreliable.
Well, We've all got flaws. So.
Well, yes, yeah.
But
I suspect he's got more than most.
But you're really interested in sustainable transport.
I'm interested in a lot of things.
And you worked with Ken Livingstone on that.
Yes.
Tell us a bit about that. Because
Well,
it seems a success down to Ken Livingstone and yourself being involved.
Well, that's very kind of you. Ken Livingstone had this idea about because he looked at a lot of models about how to reduce traffic in London, because clearly there was, the air was very polluted, and also the streets were so clogged up. So he had the idea of putting in the congestion charge, and he said at one time it was a deeply unpopular measure, and he said at one time the only two groups supporting him were the Greens and big business, and the city supported it because they could see the advantages of having less traffic on their streets. And one of the options that I put forward was doing more on walking and cycling, which he took up. And when on the first day of the congestion charge, he told me that he was standing with his chief of staff looking out of the window of City Hall at Tower Bridge, and there was absolutely no traffic on it. He said it was like watching tumbleweed go across. And it did cross his mind he'd gone too far. But he hadn't, of course. It was definitely the right move. And it also meant that public transport could improve, particularly the buses. And I can remember going to work on a bus one day and actually seeing somebody in a suit going into the city. And I'd never seen that in London before. So there was a wider bus ridership than previously. He was good. He was good on that.
And you were there for quite a time. You're 2000 to 2016, is that correct? What were your achievements there? Because your focus was environment, it was in healthy foods, it was in violence against women, as well as sustainable transport. What are the hallmarks for you?
I chaired London Food, and that was a body of people, and it was a very diverse body. It was a sort of board of, so we had an organic restaurateur, we had somebody from the city, we had people from all over, and we came together to devise sustainable food for London, because we were all concerned that there could be shortages in the future, problems with deliveries or whatever, and so actually drawing up a way to make sure that Londoners had enough food even when times were hard was quite useful. And the thing that came out of that report was that it was all very well growing organic food, that's great, but actually you need to eat local food. And if you eat local food, you're supporting the people around London, you're supporting the farmers and the growers, and that impacts on other Londoners who work there, and of course the food is fresher. But there were EU regulations at the time which meant that schools and hospitals couldn't just say they wanted apples from Kent, say, because of all the EU regulations. And so we found ways to get around them a little bit. For example, if you specified particular packaging, then they could buy apples from Kent and not apples from Spain or wherever. And
in 2013, you came into the House of Lords.
Yes.
What made you come into the House of Lords? Because it would seem as if you'd maybe have looked at it from the outside and said, well, I don't want to be with those fuddy-duddies.
Well, I was getting older. I thought there might be a place for me here. But I suppose when you're a Green, you stand for everything. We have lots of internal elections and external elections, and you are encouraged to stand, because if you don't have enough people standing, you can't get them elected. And so one of the elections internally was for a list of people who, if the government offered us a seat or more than one seat in the House of Lords, then we would say, right, here's this person. And so we ran the list, I came top. We ran it again 5 years later, and I came top again. And so when they offered us a seat, I was the first person on the list. And I didn't actually want to come in here at first, because I still had 2 years left to run on the London Assembly, and I thought my role there had more impact.
Yeah.
Challenging.
Local impact.
Yes, but challenging the mayor and being able to do things locally, yes. So I came in part-time at first, and it was a shock. It was unlike, I mean, I'd been elected to a local council before. It was a shock.
Why was it a shock?
Well, the nicest people in the house were the Conservatives. They were the ones who actually, they were the ones who actually talked to me, had a cup of coffee with me sometimes, could explain things to me. And the other political parties weren't really interested in me at all. So I had to fight for my place for a bit. And when I first came in, I got a lot of, why are you talking about whatever, education or housing or whatever? Why are you talking about that? That's not the environment. And I had to explain to people, everything is about the environment. If you build the wrong houses in the wrong place, then it's a disaster for future flooding and so on. And but nobody says that anymore. And my colleague Natalie Bennett and I, we do talk on as many topics as we can. Nobody says, why are you as Greens speaking about this?
Yeah, you have strategy sessions with Natalie, don't you? Because your agenda is very ordered, as I can see it.
Well, in fact, we hardly ever meet because we're both so busy. We occasionally meet in the corridor, and where are you going? Oh, no, I'm going here. We at the start of every session, we look at what the government's planning to do. We look at the list of bills coming through, and we more or less divide them up. It's not possible really to divide them all the time because sometimes it needs both of us in there on different aspects. But we divide them up, and we also rank the bills as whether they're important or not. Obviously, an environment bill would be very high priority, and other bills perhaps not so much. But then we get caught by surprise. For example, we had ranked the Crown Estates bill as not very important, and then of course all sorts of things cropped up, including the salmon farms, and so. But we do try to organise our time.
Is there a campaign needed on salmon farms? Because a number of members have mentioned to me about the contamination and the lice and the need to do something. And one member actually last week mentioned, it'll be nameless, but said that there doesn't seem to be a general awareness of the issues.
No, it's really quite striking that people carry on eating salmon, even though the way they're produced in salmon farms is absolutely horrifying. It is the lice. I mean, they suffer. The fish in the farms suffer, quite often die in their pens because the lice have eaten so far into their flesh and so on. But there's the impact on the wider world as well, because of course salmon farms are on the coast, they're in the sea, and wild Atlantic salmon going past these fish farms can get poisoned by the toxic stuff, all the antibiotics and so on coming off the farmed fish. Also, farmed fish mate with the Atlantic salmon, which is deeply unhealthy for that particular species.
Well, when you come in the house, I believe Baroness Hamwee was a member of the London Assembly, and she referred to you as being feisty.
Yes.
And that you don't take any hostages.
That's right.
Is that a realistic assessment of Baroness Jones of Moulsecoomb?
Yeah, perhaps it is. I think I've got worse as I've got older as well. I didn't know what she was going to say. She didn't check it with me, I might have.
Well, I have to say, as Speaker, sitting in the woolsack and just observing, that I don't see you getting worse in any way. What I see is someone interested in the subjects and the rest of the house listening to you on that.
That's very kind of you. I mean, I think I can be quite
rude. But now
rude.
and again,
I go too far.
A little snort at the bishops or something like that.
Somebody said to me once, I get away with a lot in here because people know that I care about what I'm saying. They see that I'm honest about it.
There's an authenticity.
An authenticity, yes, exactly. And so somehow that's less offensive. And
if you're talking to young people and the Lord's education programmes or whatever, what would you say to them about the House of Lords?
It's I mean, clearly the Green Party would abolish the House of Lords. We would make it all elected. We would sweep away some of these really stupid, archaic practices that we have here. But at the same time, while we've got this system, it actually weirdly works. And I think, I mean, most people, when I talk to them, they've got no idea what we do here and they don't understand it. But I do get more and more emails from people saying, over the past few years, you know, I always used to think the House of Lords was a waste of time, but now I say thank God, because we stopped the last government from doing some awful things.
Sewage.
And,
give us an idea, because you worked with the hereditary peers on that particular issue, the Duke of Wellington, for whom you've got great admiration.
Indeed, yes, the Duke of Wellington's quite a classic. He led the charge on trying to hold the water companies to account, and he ended up working quite closely with Fergal Sharkey, who is the son of dissident Irish Republican parents, and so that was
from
quite
Derry stroke Londonderry, or stroke City as he calls it.
But that, I mean, yes, we all sort of fell in behind the Duke of Wellington. He did give us an example of how you can do things very gently. I mean, that's not my style, but I could see that it worked for him. And there's other things as well. The government doesn't always get its own way. I think that's quite important, that we sometimes say you've got to think again. I mean, we do have a convention that if something's in the governing party's manifesto, we don't fight it. But sometimes I'm not sure that's right. I would massively change the House of Lords, but it does work. I mean, I do get told off for running in the corridors, which always irritates me. But there are quite a lot of people with walking sticks, so that's probably not a bad idea.
Yeah. I think I read about the climate protest and the Extinction Rebellion, was it 2019, when you were trying to get through to the House of Lords, and you spoke to the protesters and said you were really surprised you got quite a warm welcome.
Yes, yes.
What did you say to them?
Yes. Well, I think by then they knew a bit about me and the fact that I supported protest, peaceful protest. And no, they did give me... I was at something here, I think last week or the week before, and it was for women. It was International Women's Day, and I went to the meeting, and it was absolutely packed, and I was very tired. I wanted to go home, but I thought I'd make a bit of an effort, and someone in the room recognised me, and almost at once, a bunch of young women turned round and said, "Oh, Green Party, oh, you know, House of Lords, oh," and they were interested, and that was a bit of a shock. So I think there's a lot of quite politically aware younger people out there, and the House of Lords does not have such a terrible reputation as it used to have. I think a surprise to a lot of people still, because most MPs don't have the opportunity to read the bills. They don't have time. They've got, you know, thousands and thousands of constituents who want attention or who need attention, and so it's down to us here in the Lords to actually read the bills, see the flaws, and correct them if we can. And it is interesting because we have the cross benchers. I can't remember how many we've got. 200 now, something like that.
Just under.
They are an enormous source of expertise, and all the people who are, you know, the former judges and the people who are still King's Counsel on the benches, they help. And there are times when they say, "We can't pass this; it's illegal," and then the whole House listens.
The sadly departed Lord Judge.
Oh, I miss him.
You know, with his precise analysis of issues and the influence he had in legislation. No,
I felt myself a friend of his, and I was very sad when he died. But that is what happens here, isn't it? You know,
Lord Chief Justice of England and Wales at one stage.
He was, yes, yes, and he was so calm and considerate.
Can I take you back to March 2021 and the tragic case of Sarah Everard and her abduction?
Yes.
And I know you were prominent in that. But you did say that you were considering an amendment to put down to have a curfew for men not to be in the streets after 6 p.m. And I don't think it would be an exaggeration to say that it got a real big hit, big attention.
Yeah, it made some waves. The thing was, I was in a debate on here in the House on domestic violence, and we've been talking about it's mostly male violence against women, and it was 8:30 at night, which is when I don't want to be here in the House anymore. I don't like staying late. And I was just about to speak, and then something came through on my phone about a local police commander who said something along the lines of, now ladies, if you live in this area, don't go out after dark without a male member of your family or something. And I was tired, I was irritable.
Exploded.
Yeah, it was awful listening to all this stuff about domestic violence, and then to have and so I said that and said, I'm considering bringing an amendment to stop men going out on the streets. And I could see the whip and the minister opposite me going sort of to each other, what? Where does that come from? And it did cause a bit of kerfuffle. And my grandchildren were thrilled when all their friends from America and Australia and Nepal and places, they all were texting saying, your granny. Yeah, I was on a train going home to Dorset the next day, and I got this phone call from the Green Party, and they said, your comment about a male curfew has just gone everywhere. And I said, I'm so sorry. And they said, no, that's fine, it's really good. So they were quite happy with the attention. But I had a lot of emails from women, and they were saying things like, does that mean I can go running on a towpath at 9 o'clock at night without being harassed or murdered? So,
Good.
It wasn't a joke. But it
was a very serious subject, but it
yes,
should I say arrested attention?
Yes.
So it was,
yes.
2014 Occupy London. Were your grandchildren pleased when you got arrested? And maybe others in the family pleased when you get de-arrested?
De-arrested within about 3 minutes. The thing about the Green Party, if you get arrested, I mean, obviously not for fraud or anything like that, but if you get arrested because you're out on the front lines at a demonstration, it's almost, it's almost a gold star. And I didn't mean to get arrested. I was trying to calm things down, and the police had clearly had enough. But when I got back into the house, I said to a couple of people, I've just been arrested. And the only almost adverse comment I got from anyone was, aren't you a bit old to get arrested? Oh, yeah, possibly, yeah. But anyway, I got arrested.
And the issues that you focus on, I would say it's wide-ranging, but maybe electoral reform, education, violence against women. What other big issues? Obviously, sustainable food and environment, healthy living. And I think you want to provide an example to others by the work you do in your allotment.
Oh, yes. Well, actually, the allotment is only for me. It's only for me, but I do talk about it on social media.
Do you meditate when you get there?
No, I work. I get my hands dirty, and I go home with scratches all up my arm and that sort of thing. My favourite thing on the allotment is to grow fruit, because it's the least effort. You do have to chop the raspberry canes down or whatever, but growing fruit means you've not only got lovely raspberries and blackcurrants and gooseberries and so on all summer.
Young people, getting to young people, I know that's a big part of your advocacy on it. What message do we need to give young people?
I think talking to them and leading by example. I mean, what you're doing about going out and talking to them and showing them that politicians can be accountable and that any of them can ask any of us any questions they like. I mean, I don't normally go to universities to speak. I mean, I get invitations from time to time, but it's always it's usually on a Friday evening or something, and I just want to get back to my allotment. But the few times I have done it, I went to Cambridge, I did something in Exeter, just recently. Young people do love it. They love to hear about it, and they like to feel that they're talking to somebody who is engaged. I mean, I'm not sure, would you call this frontline politics? Sometimes it is, would you say?
Yeah, I think Lord Hennessy, esteemed historian, and a real addition to the House of Lords, he has called the House of Lords the best think tank in the country, and that we influence the public debate, and I'm quite taken by that. Perhaps we don't influence it immediately. For example, I remember a report by the Health Committee, Lord Patel chairing it, and it was presented to the government. Nothing happened for a few years, but they then came out with a white paper, and almost everything that was in Lord Patel's paper was adopted as a white paper by the government. So maybe it goes with age and experience. We give that information, we give it in a gentle way, but we just hope it gets taken up at some time. And I think the model here of engagement with peers and others, listening and understanding issues with a depth, I think is really important. I think people value that.
I think you're right. I personally am too impatient. As I said, I've been a Green for a long time, for decades.
I think you're undervaluing yourself. You are impatient, and I can sympathise with that. But your impatience doesn't impede the positive engagement that you have.
What I have noticed is that when I talk about climate change, there used to be people who told me, here in this house, it doesn't exist. What are you talking about? It doesn't. The climate's always changed. Now I hear a little bit of that, but I hear more now about people who accept that climate change is happening, but not as fast as I'm saying, and that sort of thing. So things are changing a little bit on the issue of climate change, which is what I care about, and all the impact that that's going to have on our lives. Whether it's flooding or drought and food shortages and that sort of thing. I think that we as humans are astonishingly destructive to nature. And, you mentioned earlier my work on sewage, and that has been a real anxiety-inducing issue for me, because we've seen water companies polluting our waterways, our beaches, our lovely fishing streams, our chalk streams that are very rare and precious, and yet we still can't stop them doing it. They are still doing it. They are still polluting. Up until a week ago, they were definitely still polluting Lake Windermere, for example, and a most amazing place. And nature gets destroyed, and sometimes it can't be replaced. It won't grow back. Some things will, but a lot of the ecology we have here just won't. It's too rare and it's too precious, and so I do get quite angry about that. Water companies.
Okay, your valedictory message in Lord Speaker's podcast. What is it?
I would say that politics is absolutely crucial for us all. People try not to get involved in politics, but actually politics is about absolutely everything, and it's about who spends the money and who gets the money.
Choice. Baroness Jones, thank you very much. It's been a great interview, and can I say that you add life experience and knowledge to the House of Lords, and
very
keep
kind
going.